Good evening and welcome to DTV, TV for Democrats, by Democrats, and often about Democrats, and definitely it is about Democrats today. I am your host, Matt Shears, chair of the Knox County Democratic Party, and I am very excited to have the new chair of the TNDP, Chair Hendrell Remus, joining us this evening. So hello, Hendrell.
How's it going, Matt?
Going well, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'll just go ahead and get right in it. So first of all, Chairman Remus, just kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and who you are.
So I'm Hendrell Remus, obviously the new chair of the Tennessee Democratic Party. I'm originally from Memphis, but my family and I have lived in Nashville for the last 5 years. My wife and I have two children. We have a 4-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. I came from my background. My professional background is in business. I worked in the private sector for a number of years before leaving the private sector and taking on the role as an emergency manager. Served as the assistant director of emergency management at Tennessee State University for the last 3 years. So my entire background has been built around, professional backgrounds have been built around strategic planning and business operations. On the political side, I ran for office as a dreamer at the age of 25. Now I'm 34. I've spent a lot of time working with a lot of campaigns and a lot of candidates, predominantly in Middle Tennessee and in West Tennessee, just lending myself and lending my skill set to those candidates and campaigns and initiatives that align with my values as an in-kind contribution in most cases. So I'm excited about the work that we're preparing to do as a party, and I'm looking forward to all the work we'll do all across the state, and just taking what I've already done professionally and politically and using that to assist candidates and campaigns and county parties and organizations all across the state.
Great, yes, and can you tell us a little bit about kind of your platform and what prompted you to run for chair of TNDP, and what was that process like?
Well, let's first start with what prompted me to run for chair of TNDP. So I served on the Tennessee Young Democrats as a national committee man for Young Democrats of America. About a year or so ago, I was appointed by our president, Jolie Grace, to serve as the ex officio representative of the organization on the executive committee of the Tennessee Democratic Party. While serving as an executive committee member, I just started to, think about how our organization could run more efficiently, how we could start to create a more cohesive group of executive committee members, how we could be more innovative in a lot of the processes that we utilize as a party. And that led to me entering the race after Mary Mancini announced that she would not seek re-election. I felt for that moment that the passion that I have for politics mixed with the political and professional background that I had would make me a well-rounded candidate to be able to take our party to the next level across the state.
And in regards to your new term, I'm sure you've come on. It's been an onboarding process. I'm sure you've been working like 80, 90 hours a week. Can you tell us a little bit about some of kind of your main goals that you have for TNDP over the next couple of years?
So obviously, we need to make sure that we have a strategic plan in place that will help to guide us. So in the coming weeks, I'll announce a strategic planning team that'll be comprised of folks from all across the state, representing every community, every geographic region, and as many ethnic and racial demographics as possible. From there, we will chart a path on how we plan to deliver our message, how we plan to deliver that message in a way that it resonates with voters from all walks of life, whether it's in urban Tennessee or in rural Tennessee. Then, obviously, we've got to make sure that our staffing and organizational structure in the office aligns with those strategic priorities. So we'll be reorganizing the office a bit with some new positions and redefining what some of the old positions look like, and just making sure that we're getting off on a good start with an efficient organizational structure that functions a lot better than what we've seen in the past. The transition has been smooth. Many of the outgoing staff have been superb in their abilities to help assist in this transition, and that's been great. Another top priority for me is making sure that we begin to clean up the data that we utilize across the state, making sure that candidates and county parties and campaigns, when they access Vote Builder or other data that's out there in our data file, that it's correct information, that it's useful information, and that it will help to guide us to where we need to be in order to gain victory. And then finally, the biggest piece of this puzzle is starting to build a coalition of allied organizations and democratic stakeholders from all across the state. Because one thing that I'll continue to say as chair, that I've been saying, is that, you know, the state party can't bear the burden alone, and we shouldn't try. We shouldn't isolate ourselves in a silo and leave county parties and campaigns and candidates to fend for themselves. And we've got to make sure that we are broadening the coalition in a way that brings democratic stakeholders and allied organizations in, and then just party stalwarts into the fold, so that we have everybody in tune and singing from the same sheet of music as we begin to move forward over the next 2 years.
That's really exciting to hear your vision and those strategic focuses that you have going forward. The data part, particularly, I'm really encouraged to hear that, and look forward to ways that that will benefit the whole state as well. When you came into this role and kind of interacting with the DNC and other state parties, are there other state parties that you look to as role models for what Tennessee can do or can be?
Obviously, I'm looking at some of our neighbors in the South. Wouldn't be right if I didn't look down towards Georgia to see what they've done. But I'm also looking at Democratic states that we saw flip in 2020 that followed some of the same trajectories that Georgia did. Michigan, Pennsylvania, even out in Arizona, where Democrats really ran up the numbers in the urban core and were able to be competitive in the rural areas enough to close the margins. So I'm looking at those models, and as I begin to interface with state party chairs from across the country, I've been asking, how have you been successful at engaging and mobilizing those voters in the urban core? But then, what's the secret that has helped you all to really resonate with folks out in rural areas? Because what I do know that in Tennessee, if we're going to be successful, especially on a statewide level, we've got to run the numbers big. We got to run the numbers up big in the cities, but then we've got to make sure that we're out in those rural areas, closing the margins drastically. And that means making sure that we're investing time and resources in rural Tennessee as well.
Mm-hmm. And in regard to that kind of urban-rural divide, what are some ways that you think we as Democrats can better engage with rural communities? Some of which, we used to win quite handedly. Just 20 years ago. So are there kind of some messaging or policy points that you think we could better connect with rural areas?
Yeah, I think it comes down to messaging. Many people in rural Tennessee have been crushed under a lot of the Republican policies that have been on full display over the last decade. But the problem is, we've been, I think, way too busy defending ourselves instead of defining, the Republican opposition. There's people who live in rural communities who have truly suffered, and we should be telling the stories of their neighbors to people who live in these rural communities. And I recently explained to somebody, for instance, if Jane, if everybody at the town bank or the town diner knows Jane, then and Jane is being, run off the economic cliff, only making $7.25 an hour, then we need to make sure that we're telling the story of Jane to her neighbors so that they understand and they can put into perspective a real person and a real scenario to say, wanting a living wage is not some socialist policy. It's a policy that's going to help somebody live better. And we've got to bottle our messaging in a way that really resonates with folks. We've got to do that. If we don't do that, then people are going to continue to say, oh, well, they're this or they're that. We've got to make sure that we're listening to folks, number one. But then secondly, we can't just listen and then leave. We've got to make sure that when we leave, we're taking something with us to be able to come back and say, I've heard your concerns, and here's a way we can help make it better for you.
Yeah, yeah. And in regards to the messaging aspect that you talked about, I've noticed that you've been sending out more statements on a regular basis, and that's really encouraging, really exciting to see. And you recently had some comments on Bill Lee's State of the State. I was wondering if you could kind of expound on those and talk a little bit about maybe some of your the critiques that you have of that, and then what are some ways that kind of we give alternatives to what Governor Lee had to say.
Yeah, so until we have a gubernatorial candidate who will be out there standing up for the party values and making sure that Bill Lee doesn't get a free pass, then it's the responsibility of the party to make sure that we're being responsive, especially when we have a governor who has set out on this trajectory to do everything he can to make the lives of ordinary people a lot worse than they have to be. We can't give him free reign to go out and brag about withholding $2 billion in financial resources when families are being crushed across Tennessee. We can't give him free reign to go out and disrespect teachers and the educational system and leave our students behind, and then try to wrap his explanation for that into faith. I mean, we are all, many of us are faithful folks, church-going people, and it makes no sense to us. It's very backwards. So we've got to make sure that we're taking him to task on, you're not going to get a free pass to be able to go out and just do people in Tennessee any way that you want to do it. You're going to have to be held accountable for it. And until there's a gubernatorial candidate to hold you accountable, the party's going to hold you accountable, because that's our responsibility. Mm-hmm. And then we should make sure that we're highlighting what our state legislators are doing to help push back as much as they can on what on what not only the governor but reckless politicians in the state legislature are doing as well, because they work as a collective. And until we send more Democrats to the state legislature to help out our own caucus, we're going to be faced with that backlash. But if the governor really wants to make the lives of people better across this state, then he should be working with Democrats, because we've got some great ideas. We've got the formula to how we make people's lives better.
Mm-hmm. The state legislature, you touched on this. Currently, we Democrats find ourselves in the super minority in both the Senate and the House, and of course, the focus going forward is to change that, to push back and to win more Senate seats, win more House seats. While we are in the super minority now, however, what are ways that you think or you see the Democrats in the legislature being able to push back or message in regards to Democratic policies?
Obviously, they've got to work with Republicans in some form or fashion. But the thing is, Republicans have been off on this, this hypocritic, radical, reckless agenda. They don't really have intentions on working with us. But what we have to continue to do is show people that we're putting bills forward that will make people's lives better. We're trying to encourage the governor and fellow state legislators to do the right thing, do right by people. You talk about faith, then do right by people. Let's start there. And when our state legislatures can't move bills in the House or the Senate, then we've got to make sure that we're doing our part on the outside to rally and organize people so that we're using the power of people to help sway the opinions of some of those Republicans who think that they're going to just have a free pass to do whatever they want to, folks.
Amen. Amen. That's very true, and it's like I said, it's encouraging to hear some messaging around. Hey, we need to get out there. We need to make sure that we're talking to people, make sure we're talking to local media and things like that. For county parties, so of course this show is broadcast by the local county party here in Knox County, and TNDP is made up of chartered official chapters of county parties across the state. What are some of your plans or thoughts on how county parties can be engaged with not only statewide efforts but local efforts as well?
Yeah, so you heard me say it earlier. State parties shouldn't try to bear the burden alone. The biggest asset we have are our county parties, whether it's recruiting or registering voters or trying to determine the hot button issues. We've got to be leaning on county parties to help guide us. But that means making sure that, number one, county parties have the infrastructure to first be sustainable on their own. If the county party didn't have a dime in the bank, if the state party didn't have a dime in the bank, what would the county party do to be able to help sustain themselves? If the county party didn't have a dime, then what is the state party willing to do to help get that county party into a strong financial position? If the county party is trying to register new voters, is the state party going to make sure that they've got tablets to go out and register folks online with and Wi-Fi hotspots? If the county party is wanting to host training initiatives, then the state party should be making sure that we're tapping into all of our statewide network, our regional network, and then our national network to try to help facilitate and make that happen. If a county party needs website development, and I'm in the process of that right now, looking through some of the county party websites, because we know we live in a very media technology driven world now. So everybody wants to go online and want to see what you're doing on the social media or what you're doing on your website. So we've got to make sure that our county parties have a brand and a forward facing brand that people become familiar with. And we've got to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that those operations aren't dwindling because they lack some of the best practices that could be shared from right here in the state with other county parties. You all are doing some great things in your county. And I told you early on in my tenure that I'd like to see what some of the things that you're doing, shared as a best practice across the state. Because if some smaller counties were able to take what you're doing, it would almost make their operations launch their operations forward tenfold. So it's going to be important for us to share best practices, and sometimes that means facilitating relationships between county party chairs that may not currently exist. So we've got to invest. We've got to also make sure that we're handing down some of the workload and then giving the resources so that parties feel empowered. And that's what I plan to do. And then keep county parties engaged in the conversation. We can't say we're making all the decisions by ourselves. I like to call you up and go, hey, Matt, here's what we're planning to do. How do you think that's going to go on the county level? Or how do you think the county can play a big role in this?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've already been appreciative of you connecting Knox County and Shelby County, because we've got a lot that we can learn from them, and they've got a lot that they can learn from us. And I mean, the more kind of relationships that we can establish, then the better that will be, definitely. So.
Absolutely.
And regarding turnout, so you talked about local county parties being engaged in registering voters and trying to get more folks to the polls. We have found that historically, at least over the last kind of 20 years, there's been a move in Tennessee that we've had lower turnout than nearly every state. I mean, sometimes we're 47th, sometimes we're 48th, sometimes we're 49th. And part of that, I wholeheartedly believe is that it's gotten harder to vote in the state of Tennessee because of the Republicans' policies. But what are ways that you think the party can be engaged in not only boosting turnout, but boosting the number of registered voters, particularly in areas that are favorable to us in elections?
Yeah, I believe we've got to get more engaged. Obviously, we want to start registering these young folks who are graduating from school or starting on the college level. We want to try to grab early voters, new voters up early. Whether it's setting up shop and partnering with college Democrats or local young Democrats to register voters on college campuses or at high schools. Uh, we've got to make sure that we're also, targeting people who in communities where traditionally traditionally we look at situations and we go, I'm not going to that area because those people or that group of individuals is probably less likely to vote even if we register them. Those days we've got to put behind us. We've got to go everywhere looking for every vote. And we've got to make sure that we're registering people, but then not just registering people. We have to have follow through. If I register you in 2021, I've got to make sure that I'm staying in touch with you so that you feel empowered and inspired to turn out in 2022. So we've got to go everywhere. We've got to, and I've said, I always use this language, but we've got to meet people where they are. I know that in some of these redder counties, people are a little bit more apprehensive. I don't want to go out there. It's intimidating to be a Democrat in this area. We've got to send those folks some help and set up a voter registration table outside of a football game or outside of a high school basketball game or outside of the local Walmart or the local diner. We've got to go where people are. If we don't do that, then we can't register people. Because most of the time we're going places and knocking on doors of voters who are already registered. At some point, we've got to say, let's go where we know people aren't registered and let's inspire them to get registered.
Yeah.
And that's what they did in Georgia.
Yeah.
That's what they did in Georgia. It worked. It showed that it worked. But that's why it's also important for us to be able to utilize our allies as well. So if we're going into, let's say, a predominantly African American community in Memphis, we know that an organization like Up the Vote 901 or the Equity Alliance would have more credibility and be able to register more folks and would probably have the strategies that would draw voters out to them so that they could get them registered. But it's so many different mechanisms that we should be hitting. But I don't think we've done in the past because obviously I think the party has tried to bear the burden alone and we can't do it. We've got to be leaning on county parties and all of our Democratic stakeholders and allies.
Oh, well, and we've got a few more minutes left, just a couple minutes. But I was thinking some of our viewers may be interested. We've talked kind of about big, kind of lofty ideas. I think some of our viewers may be interested in what is the day in the life of a state party chair like? Can you kind of run us through what's your day look like from when you wake up to when you go to sleep?
Well, for me, it's been, I'm also virtual dad, and it's been kind of different early on because I've been transitioning from the university and into this role. But typically, I'm up in the morning. I'm on dad duty. I help my wife get the kids ready for school. I typically drop them off. She picks them up. But now since public schools have reopened here in Nashville, I've been, I've started back taking my son to school over the last few days. And then from there, I'm at the headquarters, and I'm either taking calls from folks who are wanting to show us how much they want to be involved in the organization, or who wants to make contributions, or talking to the press about our plans moving forward. And then there's a whole different national approach that goes into this, where we're talking to folks from all across the country, and the ASDC, members of the ASDC, members of the DNC about how we can start to get more national resources into the state. Right now, we're exploring a lot of different options on establishing our merchandising, to redesigning the website, and then I'm meeting with our transition advisory team to finalize the pieces of hiring new staff. So it's been busy. It's been extremely busy. And once we have a new staff in place and we're back in the office structure, I'm sure it'll change even more. But right now, it's been just about getting the pieces in order. Early mornings and pretty much late days. I spend late evenings trying to reply to emails and text messages and direct messages that I may have gotten on social media, and just trying to play catch up on those end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, sounds like you've got a full plate then. Definitely. And you're broadcasting live from the office right now. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I think you had mentioned that this wall right behind you, that was a family effort, you said?
Yes. Me and my two little ones. My wife went out of town, and I brought them to the headquarters. And I figured if we're going to build a blue wall in Tennessee, then we better start with one in our headquarters. So we did here in the office. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. One starting with that blue wall and moving to the big blue wall. So.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for joining us today, Chairman Remus, and we are super excited about the work that you have ahead of you and about your agenda, and are looking forward to it. And here at Knox County, we're all on board. We're we're fully on board and ready to go, ready to get to work. And so whatever we can do to support you and your agenda as chair, we're looking forward to it. And so again, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm excited as well. I can't wait to get out there and knock on some doors and meet some good folks out in Knox County.
Yeah. Well, we'll be happy to welcome you over here anytime soon. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for joining us, and we send you Godspeed and prayers and good thoughts your way as you begin this exciting journey.
Thank you.
All right, well, that is it for DTV tonight. I'm Matt Shears, and we are so excited about the work that we have ahead of us, and we hope that you'll join us next week for DTV as well. And once again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Bye.